The desert around Tucson, Arizona holds many secrets. It is quiet, vast, and endless, where shadows stretch far and sounds vanish into the night. In this silence, life is often overlooked. And on the outskirts of the city, 3 strays moved like whispers against the sand, unseen and unwanted. But these weren't ordinary strays. Fate had tied them together, and on one night that no one could have predicted, they would see what no human eye had noticed. Their names? Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie, not given by men, but born from the way they lived. Alpha was the leader. His eyes burned with discipline, sharp as if he once belonged to a world of soldiers and commands. He was calm, steady, and carried himself like a warrior without a uniform. Every move he made was precise, every decision deliberate. He wasn't just surviving, he was leading. Bravo was the sentinel, larger, heavier, and silent. His strength wasn't in noise, but in presence. When Bravo stood watch, nothing got past him. He didn't rush, he didn't falter, he simply observed, protecting without asking for thanks. The scars along his ear told stories of battles he had fought and survived. And then there was Charlie, the heart of the trio, young, eager, and full of spirit. His paws were quick, his nose always searching, his courage bigger than his size. Charlie didn't know fear the way others did. He believed in every chase, every chance, every heartbeat of adventure. And though the desert had been cruel, he still wagged his tail as if hope had never left him. 3 strays. Alone, they would have been nothing but wanderers. Together, they were something else entirely. A pack bound not by blood, but by survival, by instinct, and by trust. But on one night, under the shadow of a desert moon, everything changed. The air was strange. The wind carried something sharp, almost metallic. Alpha's ears flicked first. He stopped, muscles tense, and Bravo mirrored his stillness. Charlie, restless, sniffed the ground and followed the scent that drifted across the dirt. His little paws moved quickly, dragging the others toward a narrow road where a vehicle sat alone in the dark. A black SUV, parked, lights off, engine silent, too silent. Alpha crouched low, his eyes narrowing. He had seen vehicles before, but this one wasn't resting, it was hiding. The moonlight touched its edges, and for a moment it seemed like a dark predator waiting to pounce. Charlie barked softly, a quick sound that echoed against the empty road. Bravo growled low, a warning, as if to say, something's wrong. And something was... Through the tinted glass, faint movement flickered. A shape twisted, jerked, thrashed. Alpha edged closer, nose brushing against the cold metal of the door. Inside, the scent of fear leaked out. It wasn't just any fear, it was human, raw, and desperate. Then they saw him. A man, bound, gagged, struggling for air. His hands tied, his face bruised, his body wedged awkwardly against the seat. His eyes, wild and frantic, caught the glimmer of 3 silhouettes outside the window. He was trapped, and time was slipping through his grasp. That man was Sergeant Troy Maddox. But no one knew that yet. To the world, he had simply vanished. A decorated Marine, a soldier who had served with honor, gone as if the earth had swallowed him. Betrayed not by strangers, but by his own brothers in uniform. Those he trusted most had delivered him to silence. And here he was, in the middle of nowhere, breathing his last breaths in a locked SUV. The only witnesses? 3 stray dogs. Alpha barked, sharp and commanding, the kind of bark that could slice the night. Bravo rammed his shoulder against the door, testing it, while Charlie pawed frantically at the handle, whining with urgency. They didn't understand uniforms, betrayal, or war, but they understood danger. They understood life slipping away, and they understood one thing with absolute clarity. This man needed them. The desert was quiet, but in that quiet, something bigger than survival was born. A decision. Alpha looked at the others, his gaze steady. Charlie's tail lashed with nervous energy. Bravo's body pressed hard against the metal frame. Together, they lunged, scratching, biting, clawing, not at the man, but at the obstacle between him and air. Their instincts screamed louder than the silence. Inside, Sergeant Maddox's vision blurred. His chest burned. His mind screamed for help, but his mouth was gagged, his body chained. And then, he saw them, 3 shapes outside. 3 pairs of eyes glowing in the moonlight. Dogs, strays, nobody's heroes. But to him, in that moment, they were everything. The desert night no longer felt silent. Every sound, the scrape of claws, the muffled thud of paws against metal, the low growl of determination, became a drumbeat of hope. Something was happening. something no one could explain. Alpha pressed harder, Bravo pushed again, and Charlie barked furiously. Into the night, his voice carrying farther than he ever knew, and if fate was listening, it had just been summoned. Because this wasn't just the beginning of a rescue. It was the beginning of a story no one would ever believe. A story where 3 forgotten strays became the only hope of a forgotten soldier. And the world was about to hear it. The trial was unlike anything the town had seen. Tucson's courthouse was small, its wooden benches worn from years of cases. But on this day, the room was heavy with tension. Every seat was filled. Reporters with cameras, veterans in uniform, families who believed in justice, and those who had come simply because they could and had believed what they had heard. 3 stray dogs at the center of a case involving betrayal, kidnapping, and survival. At the prosecution's table sat Sheriff Daniels, a man of stone, his weathered face unmoved by whispers in the gallery. Beside him was Assistant District Attorney Keller, sharp and relentless, known for breaking even the hardest witnesses. Across from them, the defense attorney leaned back in his chair, arrogant, confident, smirking as though the whole thing was a circus he could dismantle with ease. And at the heart of it all, Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie, sitting in silence near their handler, Sylvia Ramirez. She wasn't an officer, she wasn't a lawyer, but she had something stronger, decades of experience, working with animals, reading them, understanding the language that didn't need words. When Sylvia took the stand, the room grew still. Her eyes flicked to the 3 dogs, their ears perked, bodies alert, watching her as if they already knew she carried their voice. The defense attorney stood, brushing his jacket. "So, Ms. Ramirez, you claim these dogs told you something? That they, testified?" His tone was mocking. Laughter rippled quietly in the gallery. Sylvia didn't flinch. She leaned forward, her voice firm. "It wasn't a scream that alerted me. It wasn't a man. It was a dog's eyes, and 3 deliberate scratches on the floor." The words hung in the air. A gasp broke from the gallery. Even the judge leaned forward slightly. Sylvia's hand trembled only once as she pointed toward Alpha, the leader, who sat as still as a statue, eyes locked on hers. The defense attorney chuckled, raising his eyebrows. "Respect? Or projection? Isn't it true, Ms. Ramirez, that you imagine these signs, that perhaps you see what you want to see in these animals?" The silence after his question was heavy. Sylvia's answer came sharp, like a blade. "I didn't imagine a man tied up in the back of that SUV. I didn't imagine the bruises on his face. And I didn't imagine the sound of his breath when we pulled the tape from his mouth." The defense attorney's smirk faltered. The gallery erupted. Whispers, shouts, murmurs of disbelief. The judge slammed the gavel, demanding silence, but the energy in the room had shifted. But what the defense didn't expect was the moment the rescued soldier himself walked back into court. The heavy doors at the back of the courtroom creaked open. Every head turned. The clicking of boots against the wooden floor echoed like thunder. Sergeant Troy Maddox entered, alive, strong, his Marine uniform pressed to perfection, medals gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The gallery shot to its feet in shock. Some clapped before the judge could demand order. Maddox ignored them all. His eyes went straight to the dogs. He walked, slow and deliberate, until he was in front of Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. And then the soldier who had endured captivity dropped to his knees. His hand trembled as it reached out, resting gently on Alpha's head. His voice cracked as he whispered words that would echo in every heart present. "You boys did more for me than half the brass ever could. You're my unit now." The courtroom broke. Reporters scribbled furiously. Veterans wiped their eyes. Even the hardened sheriff clenched his jaw as though holding something back. The judge, for a moment, let the order slip. But the story wasn't over. The prosecution wasn't finished. Ada Keller stood, sliding a laptop toward the court clerk. "Your Honor, the state would like to present evidence. A video recorded the night Sergeant Maddox was found." The lights dimmed. The projector hummed. And on the screen, the grainy image of the desert night appeared. The video had gone viral already, over 5 million views in just days, but to see it here, in this setting, carried a new weight. A shadowy figure appeared first, the defendant, weapon in hand, his voice cursing in fury. Then, the camera shook as the chaos unfolded. 3 blurs of fur and muscle shot forward, Alpha on the flank, Bravo, ramming from the side, Charlie darting in with fearless speed. The SUV's door rattled, a muffled cry escaped, and the dog's relentless determination filled the screen. Gasps rippled through the gallery. People leaned forward, breathless. It wasn't just a case anymore. It was a revelation. Proof of courage, proof of loyalty, proof that these strays were no ordinary animals. The defense attorney slumped back in his chair, his confidence shattered. No argument, no mockery, no sneer could erase what the world had just witnessed. And yet, outside the courtroom, something even bigger was happening. When the trial broke for recess, a small voice cut through the crowd gathered on the courthouse steps. A little girl, no older than 8, stepped forward shyly. In her hands, a folded piece of paper. She reached it up to Sergeant Maddox. He unfolded it carefully. It was a crayon drawing, 3 German shepherds standing tall, their bodies glowing. In golden light, their stance protective around a soldier in uniform. Above them, in bright, uneven letters, one word, Guardians. The crowd melted, phones clicked, flashes sparkled, and tears welled in eyes of strangers who didn't even know the soldier or the girl. It wasn't just a trial anymore. It was a movement, a story that had leapt off the page of law and into the hearts of everyone who saw it. But wait, something unexpected was still ahead. Because as the day closed, the defense scrambled for one last card to play. They hinted at secrets hidden in Sergeant Maddox's past. They whispered of betrayal deeper than anyone realized. And in that tense, uncertain air, one question rose above the rest. If 3 strays could save a man from death, what would happen when the real enemy was revealed? The sun rose gently over Tucson, painting the desert sky in soft shades of orange and gold. On the quiet edge of town stood a brand new building, its walls still smelling faintly of fresh paint and wood. Above the tall iron gate was a simple but powerful sign. Bravo Shelter. Carved into the gate surface were the silhouettes of 3 German shepherds, Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. They stood together, facing forward, like guardians watching over all who would enter. Inside, the shelter was alive with sound, not noise, life. Paws clicking against the floor, laughter echoing down the halls, voices of people who had once been broken but were learning to trust again. This was no ordinary shelter. It was a place born from scars, built on second chances and fueled by a loyalty stronger than steel. Sylvia, the woman who once thought her life had ended in loss, walked the halls each morning with a new kind of purpose. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a builder, a healer, and a guide for others who needed what she had once needed, hope. And then there was Troy Maddox. The war veteran carried his scars openly now, no longer ashamed. His medals, once tucked away in a box, had been traded for work boots and rolled-up sleeves. He spent his days building kennels, fixing fences, and teaching young dogs discipline, with a patience only someone who had walked through fire could have. For Troy, this shelter wasn't charity. It was redemption. It gave him a reason to keep moving forward. The dogs? They weren't strays anymore. Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie were no longer wandering souls searching for scraps. They'd become symbols, protectors, companions, teachers of quiet strength. And through them, people who had nearly given up on themselves were learning to stand tall again. But the real test of Bravo Shelter wasn't in bricks or fences. It was in the people who walked through its doors. One afternoon, a woman arrived, her hand gripping the shoulder of a boy who couldn't have been older than 8. His name was Micah. His eyes were downcast, his voice silent. Months earlier, he had lost his father in a landslide accident. Since that day, he hadn't spoken a single word. Doctors called it trauma. His mother called it heartbreak. The staff welcomed him gently, but Micah stayed withdrawn, standing in the corner, arms wrapped tightly around himself. It seemed like nothing could reach him. And then, Charlie walked in. The calmest of the 3 shepherds, Charlie had a gift. He never rushed. He never forced. He simply sat down a few feet away from Micah and waited. His head tilted slightly, his dark eyes soft, as if he was saying, "It's okay, I'm here when you're ready." Minutes passed in silence. The boy didn't move. But then, slowly, his eyes flicked toward Charlie. He studied the dog, curious but unsure. Finally, Micah took one hesitant step forward, then another. When he reached out his small hand, Charlie didn't flinch. He simply leaned forward and placed his head under the boy's palm. And in that quiet moment, something broke, or perhaps something healed. Micah's lips parted. His voice was shaky, fragile, but clear enough for everyone in the room to hear. "Can I visit the other 2 too?" His mother gasped, covering her mouth with both hands. Tears poured down her face. The staff froze, staring in disbelief. And Sylvia, who had seen so much pain, who had carried so much grief, felt her own eyes burn. This wasn't just a boy speaking again. This was proof. Proof that Bravo Shelter wasn't just about dogs. It was about healing wounds too deep for words, about giving voice to those who thought they had lost theirs forever. From that day on, Micah returned often. He played fetch with Alpha, learned hand signals from Troy to guide Bravo, and curled up next to Charlie during story time. With each visit, his smile grew wider, his laughter louder. His mother said it best one evening as she hugged Sylvia tight. "You didn't just help my son, you gave me back my boy." That night, as the desert sky stretched out above them, Sylvia sat on the porch of Bravo's shelter. Alpha rested his head gently on her knee, his breathing steady and calm. The shelter was quiet now, but inside its walls, hope was alive and strong. On the wall of the main hall hung a framed drawing, Cassie's drawing, the little girl who had once believed in these dogs before anyone else did. Beneath it was a bronze plaque with words that every visitor stopped to read. The bravest don't always wear badges. Some have fur, 4 paws, and the patience to wait for what's right. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe for more real stories of courage, loyalty, and second chances. And let's never forget, the silent heroes among us are often the ones we overlook.